In the space year 2000, we released Perfect Dark. 15 years later, we released the making of Perfect Dark, in celebration of our 30-game compilation, Rare Replay. Now, as packed full of near-future facts as that video was, the joy of our 30th anniversary interviews is that they gave us so many more tales to tell. So, if you want to hear all about Faces and Voices, Jonathan and Velvet, and how sweet little Elvis ran amok, settle yourself in and enjoy. We may even serve cheese later. We'll start back in the earliest days, when Bond was out of the picture and a brand new IP adventure was beginning. But it wasn't PD yet, and Joe Dark wasn't Joe Dark. So how did those names come into the light?
Normally the best time, I would say, in a game's development is right at the start, when you're all excited and you're trying out these new ideas and you're just doing all this really cool stuff and everything's new to you about the game. One of the first things was coming up with the name of the game, like throwing out hundreds of different combinations of words and things, and eventually coming up with Perfect Dark.
It didn't start out being called Perfect Dark. The working title was Covert Operations.
I can remember none of the other names for the game, maybe, apart from Alien Intelligence, I think was one of them. But I think they gave away a bit too much. Well, maybe not. I think there are aliens everywhere in the marketing anyway. But, and there's a giant Elvis head behind her on the box.
We tried loads of different combinations, just finding good words, putting them together in different orders. So probably working backwards, so there's probably Imperfect Dark, Imperfect Future, Perfect Future, things like that. But those were like the last words that we ended up with. So to start with, Martin probably had a list of 100 or 200 words. And I think he wrote a program which printed them out in different orders and different combinations. And then you could just read through this list looking for combinations that sounded good. So I can't remember whether Perfect Dark was decided on before the name of the character was decided on.
And that would be Joanna's cue. Although, of course, the team had agreed back at the start that it was time a woman led the charge.
We decided very quickly on a female lead, just because we wanted to do something which was similar but different to James Bond.
I guess the team came up with the name just by coming up with a load of words that sounded like words we'd like to have in the title and sticking them on one of the doors and moving them around occasionally and just working out which ones we decided we liked over the course of a few weeks.
Does this one work? And like 2 or 3 people would say yes, and the rest of them would say no. Somebody came up with the idea of Joanna Dark, like Jeanne d'Arc, Joan of Arc, a warrior. Like, okay, that's not horrible. We can live with that.
Democracy in action. We had a heroine, a title, and a naming system that somehow worked, and we never looked back. When you think of Elvis, as in Elvis the Grey Alien, you probably think of 2 things: the giant head and the stars and stripes waistcoat. But this Mayan trooper's personal style wasn't always a done deal.
Elvis the Alien went through quite a lot of changes because he was a main character, so we had to make him something that people could relate to. So, like people from America come over and are Anglophiles, he was like an Earthphile, and he loved everything from Earth. And he was particularly attracted by this sort of Elvis Presley persona, which is why he ended up with blue suede shoes and this American waistcoat. But in his very first iteration, I'd actually based him on being really English, and he had Tim Brooke Taylor's English Great Britain waistcoat on, because that's what I thought would make him more fun. But no, he went towards America in the end and ended up as this American-loving alien. He ended up with the blue suede shoes because it was funny and it was related to Elvis, which meant that his home planet became known as Graceland.
And although Joe didn't get a chance to take the full tour, Elvis did make his presence felt back on Earth, even giving his handlers a bit of trouble.
PD was my first game testing here, and I had some levels that involved Elvis, that you had to navigate through the level and make sure Elvis was with you. So the end of the level, you had to finish with Elvis in a certain position. And the bug that really caused us the most grief was that Elvis used to just disappear. Forward, you'd be shooting the aliens and getting through, and then you'd turn around and Elvis would just be gone, and you would have to restart the level from scratch. Because the corridors in PD were all kind of strange octagonal shapes. Pushing into those corners, there's certainly a character the size of Elvis. He used to push through the collision and drop out of the level. So I found out later, much later, that they left that in on purpose. It was useful having a character Elvis's size to test the collisions on the levels. He was purposely that small, and he was purposely trouble in those levels because they were using him as a testing device to test the rest of the game.
Here's a question. Who supplied the faces for Perfect Dark's major players? We'll let the team tell all, but a few of them were well-known people, a few were based on well-known people, and a few were in the right place at the right time with the right stuff. As in, free stuff.
For the characters from Perfect Dark, we use a little bit of fancy casting because on my desk I had this book of great British character actors, past and present over the last 50 odd years. What we tended to do was become inspired by certain looks. So Mr. Carrington is inspired by a great British film actor who he closely resembles but is not, because at the time we didn't have Photoshop or anything like that, so there was no way we could take the textures and just slap them on. It was, he resembles this person. Same with Joanna Dark, she was based on Winona Ryder, but again, she's only given that sort of elfin look, short hair, from that. Various of the villains were inspired by other TV shows, so that's the point. Perfect Dark is inspired by things around us at the time.
Velvet and Jonathan were Carrington Institute agents, and I think Velvet's face was supplied by Eileen Hochberg, who was Rare Miami staff. So yeah, keeping all the alternate faces in-house, just to make life easier for us. We just gathered who we could, got them into the game.
The President, as seen in Perfect Dark, was a friend of mine called Richard Biggs, who was an actor in Babylon 5, and I thought it would be cool to get him to be the President. So I took his photograph and used him as that, but it was a way of getting a black president into a video game before they actually existed, and since I knew an actor, I thought it would be cool to use him.
And in addition to the game staff and the lucky few, there were at least a couple of highly recognisable faces in there, like these two.
We were getting more heads in the game as kind of competition rewards and as sort of, promotion for the game. And Miyamoto had his head immortalized in the game. And we put him into the Pelagic, this deep sea exploring vessel, in a red suit. So he looked a bit like Mario. I think he was happy. I don't know if he was. He never talked to me about it. We don't often speak.
So at E3, we used to have a game between the people that were attending to see how much merchandise and stuff you could come out with. So the last one I went to, which was when Perfect Dark was in production, I hit upon a scheme of exchanging headshots for merchandise. So if they gave me all of their merchandise, I would put their head in the game, which is where Jonathan came from, because he gave me this really nice denim shirt with Pokemon embroidered on the pocket, and I made sure I got his headshots before we left, and that is the guy who plays Jonathan in the game.
Fellow CI agents Jonathan and Velvet will be well known to anyone who has played Perfect Dark for any length of time. Critical allies? Absolutely, but almost even more than that.
In creating the universe of Perfect Dark, we went through a lot of iterations about the characters and their relationships. And at one point, Jonathan was going to be Joanna's brother, and Velvet was going to be her sister. That may have stuck around somewhere, but it was never carried through. That was never the ultimate intention. So Jonathan was the previous holder of the Perfect Dark kind of title until Jo beat him with her perfect score. There was going to be some rivalry there. I think we got that sort of set up in the backstory. But we never went around that. There was never time. There was certainly not enough space on the cartridge to start doing interpersonal relationships. It was exposition all the way.
And Velvet? Not such a key player in PD's main story, but she almost had a solo moment in the sun.
I remember the initial meeting with the Velvet Dark team. We were up in the boardroom and a few other team members there. I remember some sort of concept art floating around that Phil Dunn had done, and Duncan Botwood was involved with it as well.
The character of Velvet was going to be expanded into a sort of semi-sequel or spin-off, which was going to be further adventures of the Carrington Institute, if you like.
I think it was a third-person game rather than a first-person game. Maybe some kind of stealthy action game. I think around that time Metal Gear Solid had come out, and I know that caused quite a stir.
We wanted to see more of the character. We wanted to experiment with our new motion capture suite here at Rare. And we wanted to just explore more of that universe to see if we could do more with it, tell different stories.
I don't remember having another meeting beyond that. I can't remember what happened to the project, but I don't think it got out of... I never saw a working prototype of it. So I don't think it ever got out of pre-production stage.
We had some stuff built, but we never got the vertical slice I think we were looking for. We never got the hook, and sadly the project never got the green light.
Not everyone can be a star, unfortunately. Still, keeping pace with your crackshot sister in a hectic co-op assault is not a bad legacy. The faces behind the voices video was one of the most popular unlockables in Rare Replay, but there wasn't time to give much background on the casting. Well, we can provide that right now, although, as with the face models, the answer is quite often we grabbed whoever was in the room next door.
So what you'll find with earlier Rare games is that if there's any voice acting, it's done by people who are within the studio, simply because at that time it would be unthinkable to actually pay somebody else to do a voice.
I think it was an automatic assumption that as part of the music department, you would get involved in other people's games. You would get involved providing the vocal sound effects for various different games. I was in Banjo-Kazooie, I was Pipsy, and all sorts. I mean, you automatically knew that if a new game was coming out and it needed a squeaky character or a female character, you'd get hauled in.
For Daniel Carrington, I was just called up one day and asked, can you come up to the studio and do some voices for this character? And so pretty much on the spur of the moment, I had to work out what he was going to be like. So I kind of picked Sean Connery as a role model.
Please don't do that, Joanna. It worries me.
Act your age, Joanna.
All I remember about the vocals for Perfect Dark is there was a lot. And it went on and on and on. And it was take after take after take.
The voice acting came about was because suddenly we had a load of female characters in the game. I came in and we went through some different accents and so forth. Come on, Joanna, you should come and work for me.
I did the character Elvis the alien, which was basically like a Yoda impression. I could do quite a good Yoda impression. 900 years old, you look as good you will not. You know, that sort of thing. And it was basically that just pitched up.
I'll secure the perimeter. We'll meet up later.
And then I also did Grimshaw, who was the nerdy scientist guy, really annoying scientist guy in the Carrington Institute, did the voice for him. Yeah, I'll trash your security clearance. Yeah, that's sort of whiny. Yeah. Really hard not to shoot him in the face.
Find out as much as you can, Joanna. There's a gap in my records. It's a Mark II, so it should be compatible.
Just remember the process not being particularly official. I remember it just being a laugh as much as anything else. Also, yeah, being Joanna Dark, I said something like, something I can do for you, old woman.
Terrible manners, these spies. But on that note, we've hit our target of 5 things for today. So, as Jo herself would say,
sorry, gotta shoot.
Except, of course, it would be wrong to leave without addressing all those dairy products left lying around Perfect Dark. Yes, the famous cheese. There are many versions of the cheese story, but this one involving the art team does sound plausible.
I will solve the mystery about the cheese in Perfect Dark. Now, it's pretty lame, but this is the actual reason for it. When I was working with Ross Burry, he was editing the President's plane on that level, and he had made some bit of the plane, some doohickey. And I went up to him in that amusing way, and I went, see that? Looks like I made a slice of cheese, you know, the actual wedge of cheese. So, in every level he went into, subsequently when he edited it, he put a wedge of cheese in it, and that is his signature. So every level Ross went into, where he edited it, there's a piece of cheese hidden somewhere in it. That's the reason.
There you go. You've had your main course, you've had a bonus cheese platter, now you can doze off in your chair bloated and happy. Thanks for watching, and don't miss our other marvellous Rare Revealed videos. See you all on the next mission.
Loser.